When my family arrived at the luxury mountain resort, everyone grabbed their room keys with excited smiles until the receptionist looked at me and quietly said, "I'm sorry, there isn't a reservation under your name." My parents shrugged like it was no big deal. My sister smiled and said, "Guess you'll figure something out." They all disappeared into their suites while I stood alone in the lobby with my suitcase. That night, I slept somewhere they never imagined I would. 4 months later, at Thanksgiving dinner, my father stood up expecting gratitude. Instead, I calmly said one sentence that made every person at the table fall completely silent. "My name is Natalie. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my life, I believed being the dependable daughter would eventually earn me the same love my younger sister seemed to receive without trying. It never happened. Emily was 3 years younger than me, charming, spontaneous, and somehow always everyone's priority. If she forgot someone's birthday, people laughed. If I forgot to bring dessert to a family dinner, my mother reminded everyone how unreliable I'd become. I learned early that keeping the peace usually meant giving something up. When Dad announced he wanted the entire family to spend Thanksgiving week together at a luxury mountain resort in Colorado, I was genuinely excited. It had been years since we'd all traveled together. "We deserve one happy holiday," Mom said over Sunday dinner. "I'll handle the reservations," I offered. Dad smiled. "Perfect. And everyone can split the cost evenly." I transferred my share that same night without hesitation. I even compared room options online and emailed the itinerary to everyone. For weeks, our family group chat buzzed with excitement about hiking trails, fireplaces, and Thanksgiving dinner overlooking snow-covered mountains. By the time we arrived, the resort looked exactly like the pictures: massive stone walls, glowing lights, and fresh snow covering the pine trees. Inside the lobby, a receptionist greeted us with warm smiles. "Welcome to Aspen Ridge Resort." She handed room keys to my parents, then to Emily, then to my uncle and aunt. Finally, she looked at her screen, frowned slightly, and looked back at me. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "I don't have a reservation under your name." I laughed awkwardly. "There must be a mistake." She checked again. Then another employee checked. "I'm afraid there isn't any booking attached to your name." I turned toward my parents, expecting confusion. Instead, Dad barely looked up from his phone. They must have mixed something up. Emily shifted uncomfortably before saying, almost under her breath, "Well, I asked if they could upgrade me to the family suite." I blinked. "What does that have to do with my room?" Mom sighed dramatically. The larger suite only had room for 4 adults. Someone had to come off the reservation. I stared at her. "You removed me?" Dad shrugged as if discussing the weather. "You're independent, Natalie. You'll figure something out." I looked back at the receptionist. "Are there any rooms left?" She hesitated before shaking her head. "I'm very sorry. Every hotel within the area has been fully booked for the holiday weekend." I stood there gripping my suitcase while my family collected their keys and walked toward the elevators. Not one of them looked back. A few moments later, the lobby doors closed behind them, leaving me standing completely alone, wondering where I was supposed to sleep that night. I roll my suitcase back through the resort lobby, refusing to let anyone see the tears threatening to fall. The receptionist quietly handed me a printed list of nearby accommodations. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I wish I had better news." Every place within 30 miles was completely booked. After nearly an hour of driving through snowy mountain roads, I finally found a tiny roadside inn with one cancellation. The room was small enough that my suitcase barely fit between the bed and the window, but it was warm, clean, and most importantly, mine. Around 9 that evening, my phone began buzzing. "Mom, where did you go?" "Dad, you could have stayed in the lobby until we figured something out." Emily sent only one message. "Don't make this into a big family drama." I stared at the screen before setting the phone face down. For the first time in years, I chose silence instead of explaining why I was hurt. Back home, life returned to normal, or at least it looked that way from the outside. Inside, something had quietly changed. The family trip kept replaying in my mind, but it wasn't just about that missing hotel room. It was about every birthday where Emily chose the restaurant, Every Christmas, when my gifts were forgotten because someone spent too much on hers. Every family gathering where I cooked, cleaned, organized, and paid without hearing so much as a sincere thank you. I wasn't remembering isolated moments. I was seeing a pattern I'd ignored for years. So I stopped volunteering. When Mom asked me to organize Easter dinner, I politely declined. When Dad wanted help sorting out his taxes, I recommended a local accountant. When Emily called asking if she could borrow money just for a month, I simply said, "I'm not able to." There were no arguments, no dramatic speeches, just calm boundaries. The strange part was how quickly everyone noticed. Mom called one afternoon. "You've changed." "I have," I answered honestly. "We barely see you anymore." "I've been spending time with people who make time for me." She didn't know what to say. Instead of chasing family approval, I started saying yes to friends who had always shown up for me. Weekend hikes, book clubs, dinners filled with genuine laughter instead of quiet competition. For the first time in years, I felt peaceful. Then, in early November, Dad sent the annual Thanksgiving invitation. "Everyone will be here. It wouldn't be the same without you." I read the message twice. This time, I wasn't accepting because I wanted their approval. I accepted because there was finally something I needed to say. And as Thanksgiving dinner began, Dad stood, lifted his glass with a proud smile, and said, "Before we eat, let's each share what we're most thankful for." Then he looked directly at me. "Natalie, why don't you start?" Every conversation around the table faded as my father smiled proudly. "You've always been thoughtful, Natalie," he said. "Tell us what you're thankful for this year." I slowly set my glass down and looked around the room. My grandparents, my aunt and uncle, my cousins. Everyone smiled politely, expecting another safe answer. I stood. "I'm thankful," I began calmly, "for the family trip that taught me exactly where I stood." The room grew noticeably quieter. Dad forced a laugh. "What does that mean?" I met his eyes. "It taught me that I wasn't treated like family. I was treated like the easiest person to disappoint." Emily shifted in her chair. Mom's smile disappeared. "Natalie," she warned softly, "this isn't the time." "No," I replied. "It's exactly the time." I looked around the table. Most of you probably believe I chose not to stay at the resort. Confused faces turned toward my parents. My aunt frowned. "Didn't you leave early because of work?" I shook my head. "No. I left because my parents removed my room from the reservation after I helped pay for the vacation." Silence. Complete silence. My uncle slowly lowered his fork. "What?" Dad immediately cleared his throat. "It wasn't like that." I reached into my purse and calmly placed several printed emails on the table. "I thought someone might say that." The reservation confirmations clearly showed my original booking. The updated confirmation showed my name removed 2 weeks before the trip. The date. The room changes. Everything. My aunt picked up the papers first. Her expression changed instantly. "You knew?" she asked my parents quietly. Neither of them answered. Emily finally whispered, "I only wanted the bigger suite." "And someone had to lose their room," I finished for her. Dad looked embarrassed. "We assumed you'd understand." "I always understood," I said gently. "That's why it kept happening." No one spoke. For years I had covered birthdays, organized holidays, loaned money, solved problems, and smiled through every disappointment because I believed keeping the peace would eventually earn respect. Instead, my silence had taught everyone that I would accept anything. "I didn't come here for an apology," I continued. "I came because I needed all of you to know the truth." I looked at my parents one last time. "I've spent years trying to earn a place in this family." I smiled, not bitterly, but peacefully. I finally realized I never needed permission to value myself. I wished everyone a happy Thanksgiving, picked up my coat, and walked toward the front door. No one tried to stop me. A week later, my aunt invited me to dinner. Then my grandparents called. Soon, other relatives reached out after learning what had really happened. For the first time, they weren't hearing my parents' version of the story. They were hearing mine. Looking back, being left without a room felt devastating. Now I see it differently. That night, My family left me standing alone in a hotel lobby. But they also unknowingly gave me something I had been missing for years: the courage to stop begging for a seat at a table where I had never truly been welcome.